"You got a problem, boy." The words hit first. Then came the spit, a thick, wet insult launched straight into his face. It landed just beneath his left eye, sliding slowly down his cheek like the last drop of patience he'd been holding onto. The sidewalk froze. Cars still moved. Horns still honked. But the block itself silent. No one moved. Not the woman with the stroller. Not the guy holding his smoothie mid-sip. Not even the pigeons. Officer Darren Watts didn't flinch. He stood tall, hands still resting on his duty belt, like he'd done nothing wrong. Like what he'd just done was policy. Wiped it off and keep walking. This neighborhood doesn't need any more loitering. Across from him, the man in the charcoal hoodie didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even raise his voice. He just said, quietly firmly, "Did you just spit on me?" The officer smirked. "I'll do more than that if you don't back the hell up." Someone gasped. An elderly black woman standing near the corner gripped her purse tighter. A jogger slowed, pulled out his phone. The red record light blinked alive. Still, the man in the hoodie stayed calm. No yelling, no swing, no curse. Just a slow wipe of his face with the back of his hand. Measured, dignified, controlled. His eyes never left Darren Watts. And that's when you knew this wasn't going to end the way Officer Watts thought it would. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. He didn't wear a suit. No badge, no tie, no title visible. Just sneakers, a digital keycard clipped to his jeans, and a calm that cut deeper than rage. He could have raised his voice, could have called for backup. Instead, he reached into his pocket slowly, intentionally, and pulled out a phone. He tapped once. No words, just a signal. Somewhere downtown, in a sealed meeting room on the 14th floor of a government building. That signal triggered a silent chain of escalation. But here, on this cracked sidewalk 2 blocks from City Hall, all people saw was a black man being humiliated in daylight again. A young girl across the street whispered, "Why is he just standing there?" Her mother didn't answer, because she'd seen this before. And she knew. He wasn't standing still because he was powerless. He was standing still because something was coming. Something Officer Watts would never forget. His name was Isaiah Brooks, age 38, graduate of MIT, founder of Richter Systems, a billion-dollar logistics tech firm now powering most of the city's emergency infrastructure. But today, Isaiah wasn't on stage. He wasn't on TV. He wasn't even in a suit. Today, he walked the city as a citizen. Plain hoodie, no briefcase, no assistant trailing behind. Just him and a hot paper cup of black coffee cooling in the morning air. He had done this walk before, same block, same hour. Every Wednesday, 9 a.m., routine, purposeful. But today, the weather shifted. Officer Darren Watts hadn't recognized him. None of them had, because Isaiah had made sure of it. He didn't need spotlights. He didn't crave recognition. He wanted the system to show its true face when it thought no one important was watching. And today, it did. Isaiah had been watching the department for months. Reports, complaints, discreet interviews with community leaders. Every meeting ended with the same question. If this is happening to ordinary people, what would they do if it happened to someone who had power? Now he knew. They'd spit. They'd smirk. They'd laugh. That's why he hadn't wiped the spit immediately. He let it sit, let it sting, let it settle on his skin like evidence. This wasn't just disrespect. It was data. He walked the rest of the block in silence. Not a word, not a threat. Just a single phone call with no greeting, no explanation, leave one instruction. Log the incident, activate civic protocol for. On the other end, a woman's voice replied crisply. Confirm. Submitting report to oversight board and to your private channel. Isaiah ended the call and kept walking. Behind him, Officer Watts watched his back like prey, leaving a hunt unfinished. But Isaiah wasn't prey. He was the one holding the leash on the institution they thought they owned. And by sundown, the leash would tighten. The moment Isaiah stepped off the curb, a second patrol car pulled up. No sirens, just presence, power. The kind that doesn't need to shout because it knows the city already listens. Out stepped Officer Lyle Morrison. Early 50s, decorated, confident, the kind of cop who thought tenure equaled truth. He glanced at Officer Watts, then at Isaiah. His brows knit fast. "Problem?" he asked, tone clipped. Watts nodded toward Isaiah. "Suspicious behavior. Refused to comply. Might be casing properties. Gave me attitude." Lyle's eyes scanned Isaiah's slowly hoodie, clean jeans, discreet key card. He didn't see threat, but he saw something else. An opportunity to reinforce control. "Sir," Morrison called out, stepping forward. "Stop right there." Isaiah paused. No resistance, no escape attempt. He simply turned, slowly, face blank, voice even. "I'm walking to my office." "Not anymore." "You're not." Lyle stepped closer, hand on taser now. "We've had a string of break-ins in this district. You fit the description." Isaiah almost smiled. Of course he did. He'd heard those 6 words before. You fit the description. At 19, walking to a library. At 25, entering his own startup warehouse. At 33, outside a luxury condo he owned in full. And now again, at 38 on a sidewalk 2 blocks from City Hall. But he didn't argue. He just said, "Show me the description." Lyle's jaw tensed. Behind them, the crowd had begun to form, not large, not loud. A delivery driver parked across the street. A woman pushing a stroller paused. A man sipping coffee lowered his phone discreetly and hit record. Watts folded his arms. "You think this is funny?" "No," Isaiah said, eyes calm. "I think it's predictable." That word hit harder than any insult. Predictable. The implication that this moment wasn't new, that their behavior wasn't unique, that their authority was just a rerun of tired mistakes. "You trying to be smart?" Lyle asked. Isaiah didn't answer. Instead, he stepped once to the side toward the building he owned and tapped a small badge to a sensor. Beside a reinforced glass door. The door beeped and locked. Inside was Richter's private lobby. Fingerprint access, facial recognition, restricted entry. The security guards inside stood as he entered. One of them blinked, recognizing the man who signed their paychecks. Officer Morrison's eyes narrowed. "What is this place?" Isaiah turned to face them through the glass, calm as ever. "My building." Lyle scoffed. "You expect us to believe that?" Isaiah didn't flinch. "I don't expect anything," he said, "but I document everything." From inside, one of the guards picked up a landline. Across town, a notification pinged on a city oversight dashboard. Civic Protocol 4, staged and now active. And outside, Officers Watts and Morrison stood, unaware that they'd just tried to detain the man who funds half their department's tech budget, unaware that the building they stood outside of was also the building under audit for improper police surveillance, unaware that a reckoning had just walked through the front door and it wasn't going to knock. Inside the glass doors, Isaiah didn't sit. He stood just past the security checkpoint, hands loosely at his sides, watching the officers on the sidewalk fume through reinforced silence. Officer Morrison pounded the intercom. "You need to open this door, now. This is an ongoing investigation." The guard Michael, 6 years into this job, ex-military, looked at Isaiah before answering. Isaiah gave a single nod. Michael pressed the mic. "This is private property. Unless you have a warrant, please step away." What snap? "You're obstructing officers." "No," Isaiah murmured, "you're obstructing dignity." Michael said nothing, neither did the second guard. But something passed between them, quiet understanding. Like soldiers being told, this is bigger than a badge. Outside, the tension brewed. Morrison turned away from the glass and keyed his radio. Unit 413 requesting immediate supervisor on site. Possible escalation at Richter Systems HQ. Isaiah listened without blinking, his voice low. "They're escalating because I didn't fold." The second guard Lucia watched him carefully. "Should we notify your assistant?" Isaiah shook his head. Not yet. This is their chance to pause. Let's see if they take it. Lucius stepped back, quiet, respectful. Isaiah walked slowly to the far side of the lobby, past the minimalist chairs, past the touchscreen directory, to the frosted wall of windows. Outside, Morrison paced. Watts gestured wildly. He didn't look at them. He looked at his reflection. Calm still, but not numb. Beneath that surface, something else stirred. He remembered being 12, standing outside a corner store in Atlanta, waiting for his mother. A cop walked by, slowed, and told him, "Move along. This corner's not for you." No spit, no push, just tone. But it stayed, because it was never about what they did. It was how they looked at you while they did it, like you didn't belong in the same air. And now, decades later, nothing had changed, except Isaiah. Now he had a key card to the buildings they watched. Now he held the strings behind the budgets they abused. Now, when they tried to erase him with a glance, he could respond with silence that struck harder than sirens. Lucia returned, phone in hand. They've called for backup, 2 more cruisers en route. Isaiah exhaled, eyes still on the window. And not one of them's asked my name. A beat passed. Not one of them's asked why I'm here, what I do, who I am. Lucia swallowed. They think they already know. Isaiah turned. That's the part that always breaks me, he said, voice steady but low. They act like they've seen me before, but it's only ever the same lie they keep seeing. He walked back toward the glass, stood just a few feet from the angry officers. No gesture, no gloating, just presence. Watts shouted through the glass, "You're not above the law." Isaiah didn't speak. He just raised his phone and tapped once. Back in the city's civic integrity office, that tap triggered Phase 3. Notification sent. Civil rights violation. Live stream authorization approved. Legal observers en route. Isaiah wasn't yelling. He wasn't resisting. He was simply recording with systems, not phones. With laws, not rage. Still calm. Still standing. And the storm, they hadn't even seen it coming. From across the street, traffic had slowed. Not because of congestion, but because people had started watching. The cyclists paused mid-ride, straddling their bikes. A woman walking her golden retriever stopped cold, clutching the leash tighter. A group of interns from a nearby co-working space leaned against the corner window, whispering. Something about the scene, the cops posturing. The man behind the glass staying still didn't sit right. A food delivery guy pulled off his helmet, squinted. "That's weird," he murmured. "Why are they trying to get into Richter?" His customer, a man in a tan blazer waiting by the door, followed his gaze. Then blinked. "No way." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and zoomed in through the glass. There, standing calm with hands behind his back, was a face he recognized from Forbes, from TechCrunch, from last month's Smart City Summit. "That's Isaiah Brooks," he whispered, CEO, billionaire, the city's civic infrastructure sponsor. The delivery guy blinked. "No way they know that." "Exactly." Inside, Isaiah stood still. He could feel it shifting. Not the wind, not the tension, the awareness, like air vibrating just before thunder. Outside, a college student tapped her camera lens. "I don't know what this is," she said to her followers on livestream. "But that man inside, he doesn't look scared. And those cops, they look like they're losing control." The comments poured in. "This feels off. Why so many cops? Why is he so calm? He owns the building. Bro, they about to mess up bad." Near the end of the block, a city council intern named Jeremy stood frozen. He knew that glass. He'd been in that lobby. He'd even shaken Isaiah's hand once at a youth startup pitch. Now he watched the officers treat him like a threat, like a problem. Jeremy fumbled for his phone, texted one word to his manager back at City Hall. "Brooks?" Inside, Lucia approached again. "There's chatter. Livestream just past 20,000 viewers. Hashtags spinning up. Journalists tagging locations." Isaiah didn't look surprised. "People are watching?" Lucia nodded. He exhaled, not relief, not pride, just preparation. "They'll expect a statement," she said quietly. Isaiah turned from the glass. I'm not here to perform. I'm here to let them see what the system does when no one's supposed to be watching. Then he looked to the side, where Michael, the other guard, held out a small earpiece. Legal is all mine, Michael said. Do you want them to speak? Isaiah shook his head. Not yet. Let them listen. Outside, Officer Morrison finally caught sight of the growing crowd. He stepped back from the door. Hand up. Disperse, he barked. This is official business. No one moved. A young Latina in scrubs raised her phone higher. A man with a briefcase muttered, he pays their salaries. They don't even know it. The spell of assumed authority had cracked. The weight of collective silence had started to break. And Isaiah, he just stood there, still not saying a word, because now others were saying it for him. The second supervisor arrived in less than 4 minutes. Unmarked SUV, civilian clothes, gold badge clipped to his belt like an ornament he didn't respect anymore. Captain Reese Dalton, mid-40s, tight jaw, tight worldview. He didn't ask questions. He didn't skin the scene. He walked straight up to Officers Morrison and Watts and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, which one is it? Watts pointed through the glass. Black male, hoodie, access the building, refused to comply. We believe he may be impersonating an executive. Reese squinted through the doors, unimpressed. That guy, inside Richter? Yes, sir. Reese let out a short, dry laugh. Well, I'll be damned. Bold one. Then he stepped forward straight to the glass and spoke through the intercom, with the easy arrogance of a man who'd never faced accountability. Sir, you have about 10 seconds to open this door before we enter under civic authority. Your behavior is raising alarms. You will be detained. Isaiah stepped forward, not fast, not loud, but firm. And for the first time, he spoke clearly. You don't have a warrant. Captain Dalton smirked. And you don't have an attitude that fits this neighborhood. That sentence pierced through the lobby like a blade. Lucia's jaw clenched. Michael turned away. Outside, the crowd stirred. A woman near the bike rack dropped her voice. Did he just say that out loud? Dalton kept going. You think 'cause you're in some tech building, you're untouchable. People like you think a few donations, a shiny title, and suddenly you get to decide who's right and wrong. Isaiah tilted his head slightly. I don't decide what's right or wrong. I invest in what keeps people safe. This department used to be one of those things. Dalton's face hardened. You want to talk investments? You're interfering with law enforcement. That's a federal offense. Isaiah didn't blink. I'm not interfering. I'm standing inside my own building, which, incidentally, provides your department with its citywide dispatch software. As of last year, a ripple moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, he owns the tech they use. Dalton snapped, you think that scares me? Isaiah's eyes were still. No, I think it embarrasses you. Silence, then movement. Dalton turned to Morrison. Break entry protocol. If he resists, cuff him. The crowd gasped. Phones raised. Voices lifted. Lucia stepped forward inside the lobby. Sir, we're preparing lockdown mode. One verbal confirmation and this place seals. Isaiah raised a hand. No need. He looked back at Dalton. This is the last time I'll ask. Do you have a warrant? Dalton gritted his teeth. I don't need one. You're obstructing a police operation. Isaiah exhaled, then tapped his phone. That tap triggered stage 4. Across the city, red lights blinked in the Office of Civil Rights Compliance. A direct alert flagged Captain Dalton by name. Footage transmitted, audio logged, legal monitors engaged, and in real time, the system registered bias-based escalation under color of authority. Isaiah looked him dead in the eye. Consider this your audit notice? Dalton froze. Watts and Morrison glanced at each other, unsure. The crowd had grown to nearly 60 now. Media vans were on the way, and somewhere on the 12th floor of City Hall, a mayor's aide stared in horror at his live notification feed. Inside the glass, Isaiah stood calmly, not resisting, not fleeing, just waiting, because now the whole city was watching. The tension outside the Richter lobby had grown electric. Camera phones hovered like fireflies. Whispers had turned to murmurs. Even traffic on the adjacent avenue slowed, not from congestion, but from gravity. Captain Dalton was unraveling. He paced in short, clipped steps. His hand hovered too close to his holster. His voice, once arrogant, now cracked with agitation. Inside, Isaiah stood motionless, not a blink wasted. Behind him, Lucia and Michael exchanged a look. Michael whispered, "Should we lock it down now?" Isaiah didn't turn. "Wait," he said. "They haven't finished proving my point." Dalton stepped closer to the glass, eyes burning. "You think this is about race, power, some political stunt?" Isaiah didn't respond. Dalton's lips curled. "You want to act high and mighty in that hoodie? With your little building? Fine." He turned suddenly to Morrison and Watts, barking, "Open that cruiser. Bring me the water bottle." Watts hesitated. "You sure?" Dalton snapped. "Do it." Watts moved. In seconds, he returned holding a half-empty plastic bottle. Dalton took it, walked up to the glass, and with one swift, savage motion, he spit, not just from his mouth, from his soul. He flung the water and phlegm hard against the window. It splashed violently across the glass, streaking down like venom in daylight. "That's what I think of your money," he sneered. "Of your tech, your toys, your position." The crowd gasped. A woman screamed, "Yo, did he just?" A child clutched her mother's leg. The jogger from earlier stopped recording and just stared. Inside, Michael's jaw tightened. Lucia covered her mouth. Isaiah didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He stepped forward, right up to the glass face inches from the smear, and with eyes steady, voice low enough only the mic could catch, "Thank you." Dalton blinked. Isaiah continued, calm as thunder before it rolls. "You've just turned this from policy review to civil rights assault, on camera, with full department support, in front of 80 witnesses, on city property, against the man who writes your annual tech grant." The silence that followed was louder than sirens. Lucia tapped her earpiece. "We've been greenlit. Legal is live. Do you want me to begin the transcript?" Isaiah nodded once. "Let the city hear everything." Outside, Watts finally looked nervous. Morrison shifted. Dalton, red-faced, stepped back but too late. A voice came over his radio. Urgent, sharp. "Captain Dalton, stand down. Executive command override initiated by Office of Civil Affairs. City Hall is watching." He froze. The voice continued. "Do not engage, repeat. Do not engage." Dalton lowered the bottle. The crowd. They weren't just watching now. They were broadcasting, quoting, uploading, and Isaiah still hadn't raised his voice, still hadn't touched a single person. But the system that let Dalton spit in his face was about to choke on its own authority. The glass wall still bore the streak of spit. Captain Dalton had stepped back, but his fury hadn't. He paced in tight circles now, speaking into his shoulder mic in sharp, fractured syllables. Inside, Isaiah turned not away from the glass, but toward purpose. Lucia was already pulling up a console embedded in the side panel of the lobby. A sleek screen slid out from the wall like it had been waiting for this moment. She didn't ask. She just said, "Command mode ready." Isaiah nodded. "Calm, precise. Activate full shutdown. Code black." Lucia hesitated and leaped for a breath, then tapped twice. Confirmed. Lights dimmed. Steel shutters began sealing behind the lobby doors. External access was instantly revoked. Outside, the crowd gasped as they watched the entire building shift posture like a fortress remembering it. As walls, Michael turned toward Isaiah. "That triggers the internal handoff. All data is being mirrored live to civil infrastructure control. All departments tagged. All systems monitored." Isaiah looked toward the frosted glass elevator in the rear of the lobby. A blue light lit up. Executive access recognized. Meanwhile, back at City Hall, the mayor's chief of staff shouted across the room, "Get me live feed. He just initiated code black." A junior analyst replied, "Sir, the building is no longer under local jurisdiction. It's under Civic Autonomy Protection Section 7. Which means," the chief snapped, means Richter's system outranks ours. Back on the street, Dalton's radio buzzed again. Captain, your presence at that site is now considered a liability. You are ordered to disengage immediately. He barked into the mic, you can't be serious. A beat, then came the response that cracked what little was left of his power. Final warning, your badge is under provisional review, stand down. Dalton stepped away from the door. His hands curled into fists. Then his phone buzzed. A text, FROM, Internal Affairs. Effective immediately. You are placed under temporary suspension pending review of on-site conduct. Do not engage further. Any contact will be escalated to federal oversight. He read it, then read it again. For the first time that morning, his face lost color. Inside, Isaiah stepped into the elevator. Lucia and Michael remained behind. Before the doors closed, he spoke more to the city than to the room. You cannot reform a system that does not fear consequence, and consequences arriving. The doors sealed, and beneath the street, Isaiah descended, not into hiding, into the heart of the data hub below Richter, into a war room of civic defense built not for profit, but for moments just like this. On the wall, surveillance feeds lit up, not of streets, not of enemies, but of systems. Badge access logs, use of force reports, complaint suppressions, names, patterns. The truth, all of it finally had a witness with power. Isaiah stood before the console, face calm, hand steady, and said only one thing. Pull the files on Captain Reese Dalton. Send copies to Oversight, DOJ, and Public Records Archive. A pause. Then he added, and copy his supervisor. The command executed, and far above, on the sidewalk where the spit still clung to the glass, Reese Dalton's phone vibrated again, this time with 3 words he'd never expected. You've been exposed. The press arrived like sharks. 3 vans, for local affiliates, 1 national crew. Reporters leapt out with wine-blown hair and mics still clipped to their collars. What's happening here? Why was the Richter building locked down? Is it true police attempted to detain the CEO? Does Isaiah Brooks even work here? The crowd, now nearly 100 strong, didn't need to answer. They pointed. They streamed. They watched as the elevator chimed open again. From behind tinted glass doors, Isaiah emerged. No longer just the man in the hoodie. He now wore a tailored black jacket over the same clothes, subtle, precise like armor designed for silence. Lucia followed behind, carrying a slim black folder. The press surged forward. Sir, can you make a statement? Are you Mr. Brooks? Is it true the captain spat at you? Isaiah stepped forward, raised a hand gently, and the noise softened. Not from command, from clarity. He faced the cameras. My name is Isaiah Brooks, founder and CEO of Richter Systems, chairman of the Civic Safety Fund, principal donor to this city's emergency infrastructure initiative, and one of 3 private citizens authorized under federal mandate to initiate Code Black. A gasp moved through the crowd like wind through tall grass. He continued, I did not identify myself this morning because I wanted the system to see me, as it sees thousands of others nameless, ordinary, black. A pause. And it did exactly that. Silence. I was stopped without cause, spat on without hesitation, escalated against without evidence, all while standing outside the building I designed, funded, and gifted back to the city. Reporters leaned in, but you didn't respond. One asked, why stay silent for so long? Isaiah looked into the lens, because justice speaks loudest when the guilty are unaware they're on record. He turned just slightly toward where Captain Dalton still stood, flanked now by Internal Affairs. And now they are. Lucia handed him the black folder. He opened it slowly, held up a document for the cameras. This is a motion I filed this morning before the incident requesting an independent audit of the Central Patrol Division for Civil Rights Violations and Misconduct Concealment. Signed, stamped, time-coded. He closed the folder, and now, thanks to the events of the last hour, it will proceed with full federal oversight. Dalton's face collapsed inward. Isaiah took a breath, His tone dropped half an octave, no louder, just heavier. As of this moment, I am submitting formal recommendation for the immediate suspension of Captain Reese Dalton. I am also halting all civic safety fund disbursements to any precinct under his jurisdiction. Effective immediately. A murmur, then a wave of reaction. He just froze their funding. He's not bluffing. He can do that. He could. And he just did. Isaiah stepped back. One last glance toward the crowd, toward the cameras, toward every watching eye. Let this not be remembered as a morning of shame, he said. Let it be remembered as a morning when silence had backup. Then he turned, walking back through the Richter doors. No victory lap, no mic drop, just precision. Because when justice is real, it doesn't need an echo. Captain Dalton stood frozen. No words, no orders, just the cold, disintegrating silence of a man watching his shield crumble in public. To his left, Officer Morrison stepped back, barely noticeable, but enough for Isaiah to see. To his right, Officer Watts muttered something into his shoulder mic. No response came back. He looked up, confused, tried again. Still nothing. His comms had gone dark. Across town, at Central Precinct headquarters, the internal server room was blinking red. A system-wide restriction had just hit their network, not from a hack, but from the very software they use daily. Richter's infrastructure was locking them out. Not deleting, not erasing, just recording. Every movement, every query, every flag raised in the last 12 months. And now, it was streaming to oversight. One clerk leaned toward his supervisor. Is this even legal? The supervisor didn't answer. Because legality wasn't the question anymore. It was inevitability. Back on the sidewalk, the ripple spread. Reporters scrambled to update headlines. Breaking: Isaiah Brooks triggers department shutdown. Billionaire CEO declares civil rights protocol after assault by police. Power and silence. The man behind Richter fights back without raising his voice. A young officer on the fringe of the scene took off his sunglasses, leaned toward Morrison. You didn't know it was him. Morrison didn't reply, because in truth he had. Not exactly, not certainly, but enough. Enough to feel the shift in posture, the confidence, the authority in Isaiah's stillness. And he ignored it. Watts, meanwhile, had gone pale. His badge number was now trending online. Screenshots of his stance, his silence, his complicity all circulating with one caption. The other one who watched. A live stream comment read, "This man didn't spit, but he stood still when it happened. That's enough." Dalton, chest heaving now, turned as if to speak. But Lucia was already there, stepping from the lobby with a printed notice in hand. She handed it directly to Internal Affairs. Per Civic Code 482 and Municipal Conduct Agreement Section 19, Captain Dalton is hereby suspended, effective immediately, pending review by independent counsel. He grabbed the paper to fast and tore it halfway down the middle. Didn't matter. It had already been emailed to the press, and to City Hall, and to every department under his command. Isaiah stood nearby, not smug, not gloating, just watching, as the city recalibrated around the weight of its own choices. Dalton shouted suddenly, pointing at the crowd. "You all think this is justice. He set us up." A woman near the front, the one with the stroller from earlier, replied, loud and clear. "No, you set yourself up. He just didn't stop you." Another voice chimed in, then another, and another. From the interns who watched it unfold, from the vendors who knew who paid rent on that street, from the citizens who'd seen one too many men humiliated for fitting a description. They weren't just watching anymore. They were defining what they saw. Morrison pulled off his radio, dropped it into his cruiser without a word. Got in, drove off. Watts followed, shoulders hunched, not from fear of punishment, but from the weight of knowing he'd been seen, not just by cameras, but by history. The feed from Richter's lobby had now reached over 4.3 million views across platforms. Downtown billboards, since with emergency broadcast protocols, displayed a live text crawl. Civic protocol for an effect. Oversight audit active. and inside City Hall, the mayor's office was chaos. Phones rang nonstop. Staff ran back and forth. One aide whispered, "Is he really going to do it on air?" The mayor didn't respond, because she knew this wasn't his city anymore. Not today. Today belonged to Isaiah, and he was ready. At exactly 11:37 a.m., Isaiah stepped back into the lobby. Facing a mounted camera, Richter had turned outward. He adjusted his collar, then looked directly into the lens, not with rage, not with triumph, with clarity. "I want to speak directly to the people of this city," he began. "I have supported our emergency systems for the past 6 years. I have written grants, funded precinct upgrades, and helped launch initiatives that should have protected the public." He paused. "But the system does not deserve your trust if it humiliates you before asking your name, if it assaults you before verifying your rights, if it protects its own pride before protecting its people." He placed a slim black folder on the podium. "This morning, I was spat on by a police officer. Not because I was violent, not because I was suspicious, but because I was black, wearing a hoodie, and silent." The room held its breath, and that silence, he continued, was enough to trigger fear, escalation, and abuse. He opened the folder, revealing a formal letter stamped, notarized, and already submitted to City Council. "As of this moment, I am withdrawing all Richter support from departments under the current Chief of Police. Effective immediately, I am calling for his termination, and I am exercising the clause embedded in our Civic Safety Fund Contract Section 9, Subpart C, that allows for such recommendation if harm is enacted by command culture under his watch." He looked up and said, plainly, "Chief Alan Torres, you are no longer fit to lead. You allowed this culture to grow. You let it spit, escalate, and deny. And you will not deny this moment." He closed the folder. "You're fired, Chief." Silence. Then, a collective exhale. Even inside the control room of local Channel 9, the editor on duty paused playback and muttered, "Did he just?" Yes, he did. And it was legal. The clause Isaiah cited had been tucked into the fund's founding charter 5 years ago, quietly, calmly, without press. Back then, no one had noticed. No one thought a tech CEO would ever need to use it. Now, it had just dismantled the highest badge in the city. At Central Precinct, a clerk watched the live stream on his second monitor. Chief Torres, standing in his office, paled. His phone vibrated. From City Council. "Emergency session vote. Confirmed. Step down immediately." He sank into his chair. No door burst open. No riot followed. Just accountability. In real time. Without apology. Back on the street, the crowd stared at the screen mounted above the Richter lobby. Some clapped. Others just nodded. And one older man, gray beard, veteran's hat, slow voice said loud enough for all to hear, "That's how you use power. Not to flex. To correct." Isaiah said nothing else. He didn't need to. He stepped back from the podium, turned toward the interior of the building, and walked away. The cameras had stopped rolling. The crowd had thinned. City crews had begun removing barricades. And yet the weight of the morning still pressed against the concrete like a shadow. That wouldn't lift. Inside Richter, Isaiah stood alone. In the observation deck of the 18th floor, glass stretching from floor to sky, he looked out over a city that had just seen itself in a mirror and flinched. He didn't speak, didn't check his phone, didn't bask in the headlines flooding every feed. He simply watched. The street below, the same crosswalk where it started, where spit flew, where silence stood its ground, and where consequence came not in chaos but in clarity. Lucia entered quietly. "It's done," she said. "Dalton has been escorted from the precinct. Watson Morrison placed on desk duty pending review." Chief Torres officially stepped down. City Council issued a statement of support. Isaiah nodded once, then asked the only question that mattered to him. "And the girl?" Lucia blinked. "The girl. The one near the bike rack, with the green backpack. She saw everything. She's 12, maybe 13. Lucia paused. "I'll find her." "Why?" Isaiah turned back toward the glass. because she saw a man spit in someone's face and walk away like it was normal. Then she saw that man lose everything without a punch being thrown. He let the words hang. Let her remember that. Lucia nodded and stepped out. He stood there a while longer, thinking of every boy who had been told to move along, every woman who had been followed in her own building, every father asked to verify ownership of the car he drove. He hadn't fixed the system. Not today. Not with one audit. Not with one firing. But he had proven something deeper. That dignity doesn't need volume. That justice doesn't need rage. And that silence when backed by truth and timing is louder than any siren. His phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. No name. Just a line. You made us proud today. MB. Isaiah smiled, then turned toward the digital board behind him where dozens of small dots lit up across the city. Each dot was a camera, a precinct, a person who finally believed that standing still could still mean standing up. The system hadn't changed yet, but now it knew it was being watched, and that alone was a beginning. He walked away from the window. No final statement, no closing applause, just footsteps, soft and certain, echoing through a building built not for show but for shelter. And behind him, the screen faded to black, but not before leaving one line. Power doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up and stay standing.